Welcome to Business Mastery with Don Kennedy, your quick under 45-minute dose of expert insights and strategies to make a positive impact on your business and life. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. Today, we are talking about time freedom, financial freedom, and the order you actually should be pursuing freedom. So I have Brian on here, wrote the book, and we're going to be talking all about maybe some considerations that you should have about where you are in your business today. So Brian, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's really great to be here. I love talking about this stuff, so I think we'll have a good conversation.
I think so. Can you tell everyone who you are and who you serve?
Yes. My name is Brian Herriot. I am the owner of Herriot Financial. We are a financial advisors for entrepreneurs, and our focus has tended to be towards this kind of middle career entrepreneur who has started to think about what life really is all about, and perhaps beyond just work, and maybe certainly interested in freedom necessary, over massive scaling and extreme wealth building, right? So how to make that work.
Yeah, so this may ruffle a few feathers, just a warning. We're going to be talking less about chasing the money and more about chasing time. Is that how we want to phrase it? How are we doing?
Yes. Well, what I would say is, I'm not against money, right? I mean, especially, as entrepreneurs in the early days of building our business, money's survival, really, when you got to focus on money to make it happen. But what happens, I think, is that first focus on money kind of becomes a forever focus on money. And we don't kind of pause to think, hey, maybe what I'm, maybe the truth is that I'm not short on money anymore, but I'm, like you said, you were short on time. And so by focusing on the time, it's kind of a reframe of how we think about freedom. And my kind of mantra is, don't chase financial freedom. When you get to a certain point, focus on time freedom first, and the financial freedom can actually follow that.
Right. So it follows time freedom. So I want to explore that, but I do have a question first, and that is basically when we're talking about chasing time freedom, we're not talking about, having those 2 weeks on vacation or being able to check out and go to conferences, right? What are we talking about? Let's describe this very broadly so people understand. This is time freedom that is not just now I have the affordability to take a vacation. This is literally daily time freedom, correct?
Yes, how I distinguish time freedom from, say, I think a good comparator is work-life balance,
Mhm.
right? So they're not the same, in how I think about them. Work-life balance is, you know, taking 2 hours off in the afternoon so you can work 3 hours from 9 to midnight, to catch up. That, it's very kind of day and week focused. Um, I think a lot of people have challenges with it. They changed it from time work-life balance to work-life alignment, which is, I feel it's a cop out. We can't, my work-life alignment is more work, less life. But it's just shorter in focus. Time freedom to me falls in the months and years and decades. So if I look at how I want to spend my time this year, what does that look like? Does that mean I want to work less than full time this year? Does that mean I want to work, full time or more than full time for 9 months, but then take the summer off because I want to, recover and recoup and think about new and other cool different things? It's a little broader in terms of, it's very much, it's not a way to like save time on a day-to-day basis. It's almost like a new way, a rethink of kind of how you live your lifestyle in a way.
Yeah,
Which
100%.
Yeah, which is also to me then different from financial freedom, because financial freedom to me, and I've pursued it all my life, um, and it was always just around the corner, and until then the market drops, and then it's far out. But financial freedom is that you never have to work again. Great. People will be bored. People find joy in work if they can, so time freedom means, yes, I have to work, but maybe only when I want to. I focus on living my life, not by default, but more out of design. And, and freedom isn't not something that you kind of wait for, this ultimate financial freedom, but something you can build into your life while working, which means then it's achievable much sooner than pure time freedom.
Right. So
So than pure financial freedom. Sorry.
financial freedom, right. So let's start here. Anybody who teaches strategic planning and some of those things around, business design, life design will say, take out your calendar and mark off the days you're not available to work. Like it's just
Mhm.
what week are you going on vacation? When is your cousin's wedding? Right. And it's to help us figure out what blocks of time are left. I don't know anyone who has asked the question for 2026, let's say,
Mhm.
I only want to work 30 hours a week. I don't know that anybody has ever posed it that way, that this is not just take out your calendar, which days do you want off,
Right.
which is your visioning day, which is the week that you go and attend conference. So I really want to explore this idea because I think this is a completely different way of looking at what the rewards are for owning your own business, right? So this is something that you not only control, but this is something that you can look at as this is something that I'm pursuing rather than, like you said, pursuing scaling or growth or whatever that you're saying those things would follow if we were to focus our time this way or our thoughts about time this way.
Yeah, I think hearing you describe it is interesting to me because it's like there's to kind of come up with the vision for what you want. Like, what is my time? Like, how do I live as a free timer? That's what I call people
Free
to
timer,
pursue
I love
time, right? Well, I mean, but I bet when you first heard it, you're like freeloader, or like it's not that. And some people say two timer. I'm like, no, 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 it's not that either.
I love it.
It's free timer. So you have this kind of control of your time. You come at it from the top down. You're Yeah, you're like, how do I want my year to be? How do I want my next 5 years to be? But that's it's unrealistic to think that that's all you need to do, right? Because you still then, once you have that top down vision, then you do have to go from the bottom up and say, okay, you know, maybe this is my goal for 3 years from now. I can't take summers off right now for various reasons. My clients need me, my work isn't aligned to do this, kind of schedule. Um, or I'm not in a financial position yet to be able to do it. So, there's steps you can make on the kind of from the bottom up. So, always just taking the first Friday of every month off, and just that's kind of your new routine. You gotta start somewhere. Maybe then it's the first then it's all Fridays, or I've seen, people will be like, I'm in a point now where I take every last week of every month, I always take off. And so, I mean, there's just a lot of variety of what's possible. And so and what you want, it's what you want and what your business can allow for. And then, if they're not quite aligned, then it's how do you work both to get where you want to be, you
Alright.
know?
Yeah, so let's talk about these free timers because I'm desperately interested. So let's talk about this a little bit. So let's say that, for example, I want to take summers off 3 years from now. You're saying that that then becomes almost the tangible goal that gets added to the things that you're doing. What sorts of things would I need to do if I wanted to take 3 months off in 3 years? I
Yep.
think that some people listening in are going to like perk up and be like, how do we get that done? Right? How do we wrap around our brain for that because we are so used to I can take 2 weeks here or I've even seen online I can take a month off and my business is okay or I was on
Yep.
maternity leave and it still ran. But this is so much more than this sort of temporary kind of I've set things up for X, right? For this time frame
Right.
for me to be able to do that. This is a completely different way of looking at that. So how would we even go about that if that's what we wanted to do?
So let me start by saying that uh, some other people will tell you just get passive income. That's how you do it.
Okay.
And I'm like, no, no, no. I mean, great. Let me rephrase that. If
Eh,
you have passive income, awesome. That's incredible. That's great. Don't give it up. That's the solution. But creating passive income is difficult, I think. I mean, it's not really passive. It's just actually a ton of work up front for, less work later. So that I don't think that's the answer. I'm going to start with like, what's not the answer? I think the answer is though, it's how you structure your work and your team. So those are the two major pieces. And let me start with the team first, because these are the ones that people are probably more familiar with, but it's the classic do what you're valuable, do what's valuable to you, leverage a virtual assistant, set up your processes so that they operate by themselves. And so that, if you've got a virtual assistant that becomes more of an operations person, then you can turn over, the operating of the systems of your business over the 2 months that you want to go away. Those are all very valid strategies. So, you automate what you can, delegate what you can, and kind of elevate the rest of this very small team, probably that you have to cover for you. All works. That's all good. The other bigger one though that I think you can really do that's not always how people think about work is um, how you structure the work. So instead of having, and this will sound really counter, but instead of having customer service be your number one goal, it should be a high goal, which means I'm going to make myself available at all hours of the day in whatever ways possible and be 100% available to my customers. No, actually have your goal be, when do I want to work? Right. And then in the times that I want to work, then provide the most incredible service that you possibly can. And so that the technical way of doing this is I call shifting and chunking. So if you can set up your work and such that, let me take like my financial advising, for example. So um there's different ways to do financial advising. Then this is true in every
right.
industry, really. I'm most familiar with service industries. So coaching, consulting, advising, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
I like the introductory offer that I have is this single 2-hour meeting with the client to kind of pull their numbers, put them into my calculator and say, this is where you're at. You could probably achieve time freedom in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. And, it takes me a couple hours of total prep, a couple hours to have the session. It's a 4-hour block of time. Love it. It's a one-time shot. Boom. High value. One thing that I do, and I can stack 3 of these on a day. I can stack them up in a week, but I never stack them up in the summer, right? I don't want to do them in the summer. And then, then you could, if you wanted to, do more traditional financial planning for people and, meet with them throughout the year and all those sorts of things. But I don't want to do that. So I don't do it. Instead, personally, I have an investment strategy that works really well for people pursuing time freedom, meaning they want to use their money sooner than the average retiree, but they still want it to grow because you don't want to give up, the eventual financial freedom.
Right.
So I manage people's money in that way. That's a very low, I can structure that time how I want. I could even, I need to do trades 3 times a month. I do it over the summer, but it's not, it's like, a couple hours 3 times a month or 3 times a month. I can do that while still water skiing and fishing and having fun on the lake and things like that. So this whole like, how do you chunk your work, shift it to when you want? People will think, my clients need me. My industry doesn't operate that way. That's not true. Like there are ways to figure this out if you start with that as your goal. It's fun to kind of think outside the box and how this can work. So a combination, so to answer your question, a combination of the team, leveraging the team, however small they are, combined with how you define your work and chunk it in the right way. Those two things can fit well together to create the open space that our months or multi-month off.
All right, so I'm going to ask the question that probably half the audience is asking, and this is what? You're working from the lake? How is that spin freedom? You're still working. Let's
Yes.
explore a little bit what you mean by free timers is you just have
Yeah.
a lot more flexibility and choice, right? Um,
Um, yeah, great question. I love it. I love it. And I think it depends on the person, right? Like I've had summers where the previous 9 months were intense, just really intense, and I didn't do much. You
Mhm.
know, I like to read and listen to podcasts and things like that to open my brain. I did a lot of that. But last summer, for example, my previous 9 months weren't as intense. Um, I pulled out of the day-to-day work, but what I was still kind of seeking the energy. Like I love working. It's just interesting to me. Figuring out how to do things differently, embarking on new challenges like I'm speaking now. I had not done that before. It's kind of fun. And so the fear I always have when I talk about time freedom and being a free timer is that it's for like people who like I've achieved enough. I don't need any more. I have a lot of things I still want to achieve.
yeah.
It's just that summertime, for me, it's summertime. For other people, it's other times. That summertime is the time when I have a moment to think bigger and, figure out that I have this concept of the catalyst, that thing that I'm not doing yet that I should be doing, the one thing that's going to 10x my business instead of the 10 things that are going to grow it by 10%, like it's just, um, yeah, yeah, having the ability and the time to think about those things to me is still freedom, you know?
Right, right. But I think that's so important because to your point, time freedom or free timing, the year before you needed more off because it was more intense, and then this year it changed. It actually sort of follows the dynamic of business and the flexibility that you have to be able to respond to the market, respond to things. And if you are chasing, time freedom as one of your sort of core values, I think it allows you to look at what is coming down in your industry or your market or whatever and
Yeah.
make those very intentional decisions. We are going after that. No, we're not. This is no longer something that I'm interested in. Or to your point, there are other things I'd like to try and learn and do. And I have the time and the freedom to choose to pursue them. I think that is
Yeah.
a huge shift in the mindset of I don't work for 3 months in the summer, except this month I wanted to, but that was part of the freedom of choice over your time.
And we haven't talked a lot about the money part of it, but you know, the the book is like equal parts work and money. That's why it's kind of a unique book because it's like
Yeah.
entrepreneurship book, but also personal finance book. And, you know, everything we've talked about so far is great, but if people are stressed and struggled about the money part, it's really easy to even consider some of these things, right? And
Right.
and right. So that's a component that cannot be ignored, of course. Like the position that a lot of the people that I work with find themselves in is again, this is not necessarily how this I don't know if this would work for someone just coming out of school or just starting out, but
Right.
if you're in the middle and you've done the things that you're supposed to do, you've worked hard, you've put some money away. It's just that you haven't put enough money away to say I can never work again. That that money that you have is so underutilized, and unless you do something like this, like that money that's not at all enough to just live free forever, you can use to give yourself that kind of backstop and the comfort and the safety. It's like having that is huge. I'm obviously struggling for words here, but like having it allows you to do these other things, right? I'm not a very risk taking person at all. Um, even though I'm an entrepreneur and I do all these, like, I do it very carefully, and it's because I feel like I can do these things. I can make investments in myself because I've done the work in my 20s and 30s and 40s to kind of build up a base of some, savings and investment that allows me to do it. And that's how it all kind of fits together in the time freedom formula, which is the core framework of the book.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense, and the financial piece of it, might be a decision point for some people, but just as a philosophy, that even if you are in kind of the earlier times, taking that first Friday of the month off probably
Yes.
a little intimidating, like, "What? Take Friday off?" But right? So as a philosophy, what I really like about this is we're so, I guess, conditioned to save and save and save for retirement. And then at retirement, this lightning strikes. And all of a sudden that money becomes available for you to do what you want. But you've been in business now for 40 years, or maybe, you've reached an age where you maybe can't enjoy it the same way is maybe how I was
Yes.
thinking about this. And I'm not saying that you can't enjoy life into your 60s, 70s, and 80s. Obviously, lots of people do, but I could imagine, and I'm in my 50s, right? So, the ability to be able to say, I have a little more control. And yes, I've worked hard enough that we can meet overhead. We can take care of these things. And I don't have to make that the sole decision point as to whether or not I can have Friday off or if I can have Wednesday off. I think it takes some reconditioning, as you were saying, that money being underutilized. So let's talk a little bit about what you typically see when people come to you and you're looking across things and going, yeah, I think you'd be okay to do this, and it wouldn't hurt that 70, 80, year,
Yes.
whatever you if you're gonna travel the world in your 80s or whatever it is. I don't have the words either, but I know that that's a huge conditioning, especially for business owners. You work and work and work and work, you sell it, and then in that moment when you sell the business or, you know
Shock.
right, right, and then all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, now we can do," but I also have to ask whether or not this isn't great training ground
Yes.
for not having that shock of, I don't know what to do with myself anymore, maybe.
You touched on 2 points. The one is if you wait too long, you can do some things, but you can't do some things, right? Because 'Cause you're too old. And then the other one is you can get over this whole shocking scenario, like, I work so hard, I don't do anything, and you can almost, like, practice being off. Um, so many people that I work with, though, and talk to are like, I love my job, and I will tell them the more you can make it perfectly fit in your life, the more you'll love it, and then the more you'll wanna work it for longer.
Yeah.
And and I don't see anything wrong with work. I see myself working into my 70s, 80s. I'll pull back, but I so much of, like, my social life is based on who I'm working with and my status, and it's not just money. There's all these other things, and also here's a weird thing that I kind of uncovered through this whole process is people work so hard so that they can retire early. There's a set of people that, like, wanna do that. And so they're, say they're in their 30s and they're like, "Hey, you wanna take this cool opportunity and go do this for 3 months or 6 months?" You're like, "No, no, no, I can't. I gotta work hard, save so I can retire early." When you f when you say, "Hey, maybe I'll work till 60, 70, 80. I'm gonna work a long time. I'm not rushing to meet this goal. I can take that year off." So, like, working forever becomes more freeing than trying to, you know, retire early. I just thought that would
I love that. So that turns it on its head, though. So,
Yes.
that was the original model. Like, if you were
Yes.
a blacksmith, it was your family business, and you were a blacksmith until, you couldn't do it anymore or whatever, but the idea of this retirement and going away and not having,
Yeah.
you know I don't wanna call it the purpose, 'cause I don't have a better word for it, but this is a way of almost returning to how it used to be when everybody in town had a small business, right? You had the wagon
Mhm.
maker, and you had the candle maker, and you had the blacksmith, and you had all of these different little businesses, and you had the farmers and all the things. And you didn't consider work necessarily to be this bright separation from life in the way that we do now, where, like, you go to work, you do your time, or you build your thing, or you do whatever, and then at some point, we're expected to cease doing that, and it is a different philosophy, I think, than you see out there on this idea of scaling and building and just, put your head down for a little bit, and then you can, sell it later or whatever. This idea of working for life, I don't know how that's gonna play. Please don't come at us in the comments. Leave good comments, not working for life, because we mean this, at least I do, from this idea of if you love what you do, why would you feel pressured to stop because you hit an arbitrary number of age, or you hit some sort of, um, expectation, I guess, and it's maybe not yours.
And I want to acknowledge that, for physical reasons or emotional reasons or whatever, people may need to stop working,
Yeah.
right? And that's why you should save, right? I'm not advocating not saving either.
No, no, I get it. It's a delicate nuance.
But you had asked before about kind of how people think through, can I do this? And so there's the the best way for me to explain it is to look at like 1 year, and that'll help me explain the time freedom formula. And then based on that, that's not the end of the story because people still have, I've got a 14-year-old, so I'm going to have college tuition coming in the future. So, like, whatever I figure out in 1 year, I still have to do some projections, but I can talk about how I address that as well. So, I start by to explain the time freedom formula by referencing the financial freedom formula. So, let me start first by saying in a year's time, you have a certain lifestyle that you live and expenses related to that. So you have these lifestyle expenses that you need to cover in a year. The financial freedom formula says, how do I cover those? That number needs to equal investment income in some form or shape, right? And usually that's, in retirement, you could have some pension income, or you could have some rental income, or you could have some sort of income coming in. But for a lot of people, it's also withdrawing off of that large nest egg that they've saved. The studies and upon studies that have shown and reinforced it say that you can, you know, again, the sticklers will say it's not exactly that, but by and large, 4%. If you can pull 4% off of the amount that you saved, and for the most part, use that to live $100,000 that you need to live on each year, you've saved $1,000,000. Yay, excellent. 4% of that is 40,000. So answer freedom formula is, well, you're not financially free yet because your thousand is not covering your 100,000. Am I still coming through okay?
No, you're freezing, but, yeah, okay.
Mm.
It's freezing a little bit, but that's okay. Again, we can edit it all out. So you were talking about
Okay.
percent. So I would say, again, start from the you save $1,000,000, you need 40. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, you've saved $1,000,000, which is awesome. And using the 4% rule, that means that you could safely convert that to $40,000 a year. You could live off of $40,000 per year. Now, that $40,000 is not covering the $100,000 of lifestyle expenses. So in the financial freedom equation, it's not working. You're not financially free.
Right.
That's why people get discouraged because you need to have a lot of money if you're going to live off of 4% of that to cover your lifestyle expenses. The time freedom formula adds in a third component. So lifestyle expenses equals investment income. How do we come up with that other $60,000, right? Flexible income, flexible work. And so that's again, like, you do still have to work, but how do you structure your work in such a way that you can earn $60,000, but you can do it in a way that's totally in line with exactly how you want to do it. Um, Most of the time when I map that equation out for people, they're like, "Only $60,000?" Like, it's usually a number, typically, that's much less than what they're currently making, because what you're currently making is covering your expenses plus savings plus, all of these other things. Plus, you're probably going harder than you need to go, and you've got the huge numbers. So, what I use that equation for is to tell people it's not as difficult as you think it is, right? The number is usually lower. Okay, so when you map out the time freedom formula, you're like, okay, I live on 100, I can pull 40 from my investments, and I need to come up with 60. Do your own numbers, right? Um, that's a good starting point, right? And so if people are like, man, I could easily make 60 grand, I'm like, okay, well, you're probably close to having time freedom. Like, we just need to move some things around. Some people are like, no, I'm nowhere near, and that's okay, and we can work toward it. Now, how do you deal with the future? Um, I you need to pull in a calculator, basically, that allows projections. And so, and this is a free resources that your listeners can go to. But what I use for myself, for my clients, or anybody that wants to access it on the web is the timefreedomcalculator.com. And it is kind of like a retirement calculator, except it allows for you to have this flexible work component in there. And so if you put your expenses in now and into the future, your current investments in, including rates of return that you believe you'll earn, and flexible work, whatever it looks like. It could be flexible work like we've been talking about. It could be, I'm going to get a pension starting at age 60 from a job I worked a while ago, or my Social Security comes in at age 72. You can put all those in there, so maybe you have like 8 cards of things. It looks like cards, but there's like two major expenses, one set of investments, and then some flexible income. It will show in the graph that you don't run out of money, right? That's the goal. Is you want to, if you can make the numbers work in such a way that you don't run out of money by the time you're 80, 90, 100, then guess what? That you can start living this flexible life as of the age that is indicated in the calculator. And so it's a very, I tell you, developing calculators like that, some of them you can go on the simple side, and it's like, what am I even doing this for? And you can go really complicated. And so I've tried my hardest to find this sweet spot where it's meaningful. Um, you can put your real numbers in there, no account numbers, just like, dollar
Yeah,
values.
down to your revenue and stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and tweak it to see that it can work, and, if you wanna go into the details, you can flip from the graph to the table view, and you kinda see how the money's flowing from year to year. Um, yeah, but it's, that tool has been so helpful to just give me the kind of the confidence to be like, all right, this, if I can just keep at this, I can, by and large, make enough in 9 months to last me for the year. Um, Not really, I'm pulling on a little bit of my investments, but they're growing in the background. I can just keep this up, and, I'll be fine. Um, or you put another scenario in and say, "Hey, I wanna shift my career. I'm gonna invest in myself," and you can kinda move the numbers around and see, how that will work for you too. But it's, plus for the people that like to do that kinda stuff, it's fun to play around in the calculator. Um,
Yeah.
so
Business owners, by and large, we appreciate tools that allow us to change variables. We're much less loving the things that say this is it, because I think one of the reasons we become entrepreneurs because we want to make some more of our own decisions and we want to have the data to back up some of those decisions. So what is the psychological shift that you have seen when somebody has sort of that aha moment of I can start now or I can start in a year? What does that look like? Because um I can imagine that it makes people go, "Wow, there's no time to wait until I'm 65 or 72."
the the it depends on the type of person, but the the scenario that I kinda drives me to continue doing this work is this. It's the person who's 50 usually and, has worked really hard and got passed over for promotion, right? And this is in the corporate world, or an entrepreneur that, um, has been given it their all, but maybe lost this customer or something like that. And, I'm not 10xing anymore. And the scenario that I don't want, and like, you can decide to just keep at it, and go for it, or do something different. The one that I don't want anyone to do it is just like, well, I only have 15 more years. I'm just gonna I'm just gonna keep doing it. I don't love it. I have no passion. I like, oh, it's just that like hurts me to hear that. And it's, you hit this like inflection point, and you can either recommit, just deal, which is the worst, or do something different. And then when you can show somebody that this scenario, that's something different, and it's not just different, and it is different and better. They're like, whoa, I just hadn't, people don't think about it for some, I think it's because you're right. We're just like driven, like, work forever and then retire. Like, it's not our fault almost. It's like,
Yeah, we've
it's
been
just like
conditioned that way, sure,
tradition. That's
right?
the word. Yes.
Yeah.
Ugh. So it is wonderful, and especially if you're working with when I'm working with existing entrepreneurs already, they don't have to overcome that. Oh, I don't know if I can start a business thing. That's a challenge for another kind of set of folks. But yeah, it's just when you own a business, you can craft it how you want, right? And and realizing that that's still not making you like a greedy person or a selfish person or anything like that. Because I'll tell you, if you can do it that way, it'll give you the energy to give more, for your customers. Um, if you can run the business in the way that works for you.
Right, absolutely. I mean, I know there's gonna be people who are listening in and like, "Wait a minute. This may be something that I'm, ready to do or almost ready to do." But I would just challenge even the people who are maybe a little younger in business and maybe not to the point where they can plug in a lot of investments and
Mhm.
and even encourage them to take a look at the tool, take a look at the book, and make some downstream plans before the age of 65.
Yes.
And here's the other thing too. I think a lot of times we get wrapped up in our, I'm gonna say younger years, right? But we get wrapped up in the doing and all the things that we forget we only get one big, glorious, amazing life.
Yeah.
And the longer we get into business and, children grow up and leave home and things, I think our perspectives really do shift as to what do I want to be doing, right? What do
Mhm.
I want to see, experience, touch, taste, smell? And I think that anyone who's listening who's maybe a little bit of a younger entrepreneur, that you sit with that and you think about, because we always talk about the intentionality of things, but I don't remember really talking about the intentionality of your time outside of productivity or time management. I think that's sorta how we're, I don't wanna say pigeonholed, I don't have a good word for
Mhm.
how we're supposed to look at time, right? If you read the books, if if you look at the things about productivity and doing less and more time, Pomodoros, all those things, all of that is managing the resource. But when's the last time that we were asked to look and say, what are all the possibilities for that resource? I can't imagine I've seen it anywhere else.
And, we're two Gen Xers talking about, like, the younger generation. I've worked with a few, Gen Zers, and the amazing thing I found is that they already know this stuff, like, whereas we're like, "I never thought about that."
Yeah.
They're like, "This is what I think about." And so, their perspective on this concept in the book is not that it's a new idea, but it's more of a how-to, like, how can I actually make this work? Because there's a lot about financial freedom and, scrimping and saving and, maxing your savings rate and putting it in an index fund and letting it grow low cost, all those sorts of things. But my approach is different from that because that to me, and I did it, when I was young too. And I'm able to reap some rewards from that. That's helped me here, but you give up living a little bit, when you're like, well, I can't, we're using the floss and all those crazy things that not having the Starbucks, like well, I wish I would have had that because that would have been enjoyable. But anyway, my point being that the Gen Xers or the Gen Zers are like, no, I want to live now, um, but I still want to know that I'm going to be safe in the future. So it's like it's a nice fit for the newer generations.
So why do you think us Gen Xers are so resistant to this idea? Because I am highly curious if they got that already at the like if I would have explored this at 25 or 27 or 31, which we didn't because we didn't know. So why do you think that they're so open to this and why are we so resistant?
I think, I one of the regrets is that I didn't backpack around Europe for a year or 2 after college, you know what I mean? Like, if I could go back, I would totally do it. Um, I think it's, our parents worked at the same place their whole career. We are doing our own businesses, and then it just gradually working its way down. So, like, even though I've pushed the envelope a little bit, my influences were my own parents, and I think that the Gen Z are looking at their parents and going one step further. So, I mean, who knows what it's gonna be like in 50 years? I think it's gonna be a bunch of independent people doing their own thing, which would be so awesome, if we can make the health insurance even more affordable. There's some of this stuff, but it is doable. And if it can get better and better, like, well, hopefully you got some of that there.
Yeah, we got some of it. We got some of it. Okay. So let's we're gonna put the tool obviously down in the show notes, but where can we your book and where can we stalk you on social media? That's what I call it anymore or lurking. I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
how do people find you?
Yeah. So the time freedom calculator is a great tool. The book is not yet out. It is still to be published. The website that I my whole life lives around is going through a rebrand, but it is timefreedom.life.
That life.
And that's where life. That's where you can find me writing, speaking. I have a podcast as well, the Time Freedom Podcast. Um, our community, all things time freedom at timefreedom.life.
Amazing. All right. So we're going to put all of that again into the description and the show notes. If you find us on the day that this podcast launches, you will be able to find everything. And 2 years later, you'll be able to find it again. And maybe that'll be the year you take a summer off. That could be really fun. But I really appreciate this perspective. And I really um, love this idea that, especially for our generation, because I'm going to pick on the Gen Xers, this is such a turning the idea on its head that you don't work to a deadline and then stop and then enjoy. You're saying, "No, no, no. This is a better way to enjoy and leverage your resource of time." So, excellent conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Don. Been a pleasure.
All right, we'll talk to y'all next time on the next episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Business Mastery Podcast. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to DawnKKennedy.com, and you can now check us out on YouTube as well as, of course, any of your favorite platforms that host podcasts. Take care.